Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this panel. For those of you who are sitting in the back of the room, we just want you to know we can still see you when you scoot out the back. We're actually really excited about this panel. There have been so many questions about district level SEL. What is it? Exactly what does it look like in practice? So our hope for today is to offer you a panel who can speak with experience around SEL. The plan for today is us to do just a quick round of brief introductions, just a name and a title, to allow more time for some facilitated discussion, and then we will open it up and allowing 15 minutes for anybody in the audience to ask a question of any of our excellent panelists. So my name is Niemi. I'm the CEO of CASEL. For those of you that don't know, that's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And I am joined here by four wonderful people. Why don't you introduce yourself and your title?
Okay. I'm Pamela Randall-Garner. I'm the Senior Staff Advisor at CASEL, and I support Atlanta Public Schools, Metro Nashville Public Schools, Tacoma, and Denver Public Schools in this SEL work.
Great. Meria Carstarphen. I'm the current new superintendent for Atlanta Public Schools, but I came to Atlanta most recently from Austin, Texas, where we've done the initiative and the work and the research twice. So I'm here because I think we have a story to tell about those two experiences.
And I'm Kyla Krengel. I'm the Director of Social Emotional Learning for Metro Nashville Public Schools.
I'm Juan, Cabrera, the Superintendent for El Paso ISD, El Paso, Texas.
Great, excellent. So why don't we start the discussion with a question that any of you should feel free to answer, and that is, why have you chosen to prioritize SEL in your district?
Great, I'm happy to start. Again, as a superintendent in two districts where we did social emotional learning, we had two different perspectives. The first one in Texas, as you know, it is the birthplace of No Child Left Behind, a lot of high stakes accountability, which came with a lot of sanctions and consequences when you weren't meeting very high standards for academic outcomes. And so it actually did a lot of damage. We're a capital city in our district from a culture perspective. Teachers were super stressed out. Schools were being closed by the state commissioner with almost no notice. You would literally end a school year and a month later find out that you have schools that are being closed because they weren't hitting the mark. And there was a lot of churn around this kind of high stakes accountability. And at the end of the day, after talking to a lot of teachers and a lot of principals, the priority about serving kids through whole child development was something we could all agree on. And in doing that, we felt like the components of kids and staff having the supports for social emotional health and well-being was essential. And it actually became our turnaround or reform model. So we put that at the forefront of our work, and it changed all the dynamics around how we were engaging with our schools and how we were engaging with the state. And at the end of the day, we did get all of our schools off of the multi-year academically unacceptable list in a very short time frame, and it is still at the heart of the turnaround and outcomes coming out of Austin, Texas. In Atlanta, on the other side, it was just a hot mess. It was the district where the largest cheating scandal in the country had happened. There was just a lack of management and control in the system in general, but most importantly, I think kids were in a fight, flight, freeze, along with staff mode, and the culture was just toxic. And so for us, in a different way, for a different reason, it became essential for our kind of management, but also like our vision for where we wanted to be. And we made culture one of the four key pillars for our turnaround model in Atlanta. And I think, if you were to look at, and we can talk about this later, but you got the data of where we were just 2 years ago and where we are today around how many kids get arrested, what people are saying about culture and climate, it is very different and dramatically improved in just 2 short years.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, yeah, following Maria's lead on what she discussed, I'll give you just a different perspective for me. So I hate to lose at anything, but I think we had the second largest cheating scandal in the country that I inherited.
Well, aren't we proud?
But that's okay. That's not it. And even as bad as my predecessor went to jail for that, and it was just a big problem. We're the largest school district in the state to lose their board that was taken over by the state. And I think and certainly something that we haven't spoken about a lot. I think there's a lot of reasons we were unhappy with NCLB and the pressure of the high stakes testing. But I think that such a strong emphasis on data with all the stress and all the pressure we put on teachers actually got to the point where kids really became more about numbers and data and less about building relationships with kids. So when I first came into the district 44 months ago, I'm not keeping track of the months or anything, 44 months ago, it was, I just had this real somber sense of kind of a cultural abyss. This wasn't a real happy place, so compliance driven. We'd been through a lot of, 3 interim soups. The state took over the district, and I just felt like adults, in order to protect themselves, are really, really focused on adults. So I started looking at discipline data, and I was shocked. We have 200,000 kids in the county, and we have 60,000 of those kids. When I looked at the last 5 years of discipline, our 60,000 kids had more than twice the number of referrals than all the other kids in the county together. And we're the same kids. We're the same families. So to me, then I started thinking, maybe there also is a big issue around. Not only are we so focused on the data, we really aren't even taking care of kids' social and emotional health and making sure they're ready and prepared for school. So we immediately started putting less emphasis on the test and talking about building relationships with kids, talking to teachers about, it's okay to take more time to get to know kids, to find out what's going on with them. And we chased immediately. I looked up CASEL and had seen the work in Austin, and we asked CASEL to please come help us. We begged and pleaded and thought that just with all we had been through, maybe it's similar because of the cheating scandal, which then again, you don't realize, but if you think about it, it's an excessive focus on what's good for adults, datas and scores and doing all that to the extent of manipulating kids. And that's almost taken, the antithesis of what we're in this business for, right? To take care of children in all of their development, whole child development, as you said. And for me, we just saw becoming a part of CASEL and really making it one of our pillars of focus and something I talk about in every principal's meeting all the time, use words like love and care and support and, building relationships, trying to change the culture to say it's not all about the test. The test is important, but if we want to build a community-based accountability system to look at our success from different measures, this certainly has to be a part of it. So CASEL for us is critical to the work we want to do going forward.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about what outcomes you have seen. There's a lot of talk about SEL, and people talk about the importance of relationships and the fact that if you want students to learn and learn anything, we have to put students at the center of their learning. We have to connect with them emotionally, socially, and academically in a way to drive academic achievement. But there are many results that school districts who are implementing SEL are seeing. And I would invite any of you to share either your knowledge of the research of SEL or what you're seeing in your own districts.
Well, I'm happy to speak on what we found as we started the Collaborating Districts Initiative and we started meeting with principals as they were considering joining the CDI, what we call the CDI. One of the first things out of the principals' mouths was, before we can start talking about teaching our students these competencies, these 5 competencies, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills, we have to address the adults in our building. They said before that we're able to start trying to teach these students explicitly these competencies, we've got to create a culture and a climate with our staff members, all the way from central office through the cafeteria workers, to the security officers, to the teachers, to the parents. Every single person in that community needs to understand and be able to assess their own SEL skills and work on those SEL skills before we're able to inform or teach the students. So that was one of the first things that we noticed as we started this work. And we now see through the research and through the districts that have been doing this work for 5 or 6 years now, that it really is a parallel track, that as we're teaching the students, the adults are understanding how important it is for them to model these skills so that the students are able to see, yeah, you're walking the talk, if you will. So that's one of the, I think, aha moments for us, and I know the research is backing that idea up as well. And we also know through research, through the Durlec studies, as well as countless other meta-analyses, that when students are in a high-quality SEL environment, there's something that the Columbia Teachers College did, that they showed the economic value of SEL. And it was the
return on investment.
The average cost ratio, that for every dollar spent, there's an $11 return. And so that's another reason, if you're not going to just look at the research, look at the economic value of investing that $1 for those students is going to have an $11 return on that investment. So there are a variety of reasons of why this work is really important.
But I would just add, from a superintendent's perspective, and I love that because we're using taxpayer dollars, but I also care, like, kids get better in their academics. So they were seeing things also like 11 percentile improvement on academics. They saw decline in dropouts, increase in attendance rates, increase in graduation rates. And then I'll just speak specifically about Atlanta. One of the things, I'm with you on the adult piece, like getting the adults sorted out so they know what it looks like, feels like, and can teach it, but also they have to demonstrate it, they have to do it. And what we found in working with, for example, we work with our bus drivers, and we also work with our school resource officers, the police officers in our schools. And we saw, when I first came to Atlanta, we had 500, we were only 50,000 kids, 565 student arrests. That's not even just all the other stuff, like being referred to. This is just arresting kids. So, like, think about that. We don't even go to school for 365 days a year. So you're talking about, and when we did the check, it wasn't even a full school year. Like, it was like 7 months of a school year. So that means you're arresting at least 1 or 2 kids a day somewhere in the system at all ages. Then I took that and went back and compared, because we also had police in our schools in Austin, and the district in Austin was twice the size, almost 100,000 kids, and had less arrests. So we changed our entire model. We're doing social emotional learning training with our now school-controlled SROs. And this school year, same time period, we've gone from 565 arrests to a total of 175. And they were legitimately breaking the law, like brought a gun, tried to build a bomb in the bathroom, stuff like that. But they really did naughty things that justify law-breaking intervention versus adult discretionary decisions about kids, like he just wouldn't sit down, and I just had it, or she popped her gum one time too many, or he kicked the trash can when I was talking to him, things that don't justify an arrest. So my point is just that for us, this deep investment in the people who support children, aren't teaching them, but should be counseling, mentoring, and supporting. So I want the bus driver to just be nice in the morning when the kid gets on the bus, not sit you down in the back and shut up. Like, instead, good morning, it's nice to see you, Meria. I hope you have a good day in school. When a kid walks out of a house and gets on the school bus, that's after mom and dad are the first teacher. The bus driver is typically the second. And they go through several different people before they see their content teacher, during a day. So my point is just that we're seeing other evidence that it makes a difference when we're deliberately training the adults to engage and behave with our kids in a different way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what Maria's seen, we've seen as well. One of the facts that I'm most proud of is, as we're looking at discipline and all these issues going on, and clearly it was just adults with, and just give the benefit of the doubt. I mean, hyper focus on data and, using every minute of instructional time. It got to the point where any kid not prepared or disengaged was just expendable. So kids were getting kicked out of class, and you don't have to be an expert in education to know that if their butts aren't in the chair, statistically, their chances of doing well in that class. And disproportionately, these were our boys. Right, our boys of color were disproportionately stuck in this group at a high percentage. So they were they were getting the maximum if they could, 180 days. So you missed the whole school year. I mean, basically, if you get in trouble after October, November, you don't come back. So when I arrived there, we had 6 alternative schools, the most in the county by far. We're down to 2, and one of them is going to close. So now we've closed 5 alternative schools. Can you imagine that many kids were at this other building? And if you've been in one of these alternative schools, they're not great learning institutions for kids. They're typically,
Warehouses.
pretty rough,
Right.
cold
Yeah.
environments. And the
That's
fact that
terrible.
we're down to that 1.5 school, and right now we've got 20, 30 teachers with less than 30 kids at the last one. So doing things also in terms of policy where we said, from K to 3, you don't get to kick a kid out of school. He has to stay on the campus. We're going to figure out something for him. We just made that a flat rule. We've gotten a lot of pushback, though. It's not as easy as it sounds, because then people are saying, so here on the other side, in the community, well, the superintendent's saying we can't expel kids anymore. Of course, we don't want to endanger any other child or staff member anywhere in a building. We're not saying that it goes to that extreme, but we're just saying that you take a little more time. I'm not kicking a kid out of school for chewing gum or raising his hand or, talking to a girl too much, next door or something like that. Just, we've got to be a bit more reasonable than that. And I think that the first couple of years were tough when we started locking that down, because it is, I'm interested to hear that this fact about the adult track and the children track, in terms of them saying, okay, my job is not only to prepare them for the test. Certainly that's what we get graded on. We've changed a lot since Texas started, going back from, I don't know how many exams we had, 15 or 20 down to 5, still too many. But so teachers are just starting to spend more time, understand that they have to build relationships and help kids through all of their issues in this whole child development, not just the academic success, with the understanding that we believe if you do that right, you will become more academically successful, or at least find your voice. And then doing things like changing the student-directed learning. We're doing a big focus on inquiry-based, project-based learning. Kids, so then teachers have to understand it's okay to talk more in class now. Guess what? In a collaborative environment, kids have to talk and engage and enjoy what they're doing in class. And that whole shift from a classroom management, if you're a little OCD and you don't want anybody to talk in class, you're gonna have a hard time working in our school district, because it's okay to talk in class now. And all these paradigms going on, it's not as easy as it sounds initially. When you think about it, you say, oh, I'm going to do a few things and everybody's going to love it. Well, not everybody loves it. Even though it's better for kids, not everybody loves it, but we've made tremendous progress. Very excited about it.
So let me try to summarize some of the statements around outcomes and then shift a little bit into what it looks like in your district. What I think you heard is, when we are focused on those things that influence the climate, the culture, the learning environment in which kids are learning, and when we are focused on the social and emotional health and well-being of kids, research has shown they perform better academically, to the tune of 11 percentage points higher. They behave better, they are healthier, they graduate at a greater rate, and they are overall more engaged and happier human beings. The life outcomes, too, I will also mention, while it's not something we're focused on necessarily in this panel, organizations from many different disciplines have all come to the same conclusion. If you are somebody who's familiar with Robert Wood Johnson's research on health, they are showing that health benefits because of SEL are astronomical. And we are seeing a convergence of research across the board, underscoring the importance of focusing on this for kids. So let's get a little bit then into the what is this? What does it actually look like in your school district? Maybe Kyla, you want to jump in on this one?
So in Nashville, I'll talk about it from 3 different perspectives, like a district level, a school level, and then even a classroom level, what SEL looks like. So from a district level, one of the things that, well, there's a lot that we're working on, but one of the big things, and I think you've heard this said, is really making sure that we have that common language. And when we started this work, Nashville started about 5 years ago, and one of the first things that I realized was that we didn't even have an understanding of what social emotional learning was. We didn't have a definition. And so we created a definition and really started working and sharing that definition and sharing the common language. And we found that it was really important to start at central office, because if we didn't have the buy-in at central office and we weren't on the same page about how to integrate SEL into every district initiative, then it wasn't going to happen. So that's one of the big things that we work on. My department is social emotional learning, and that includes just SEL, it includes restorative practice, and it includes our behavior analysts. And so we spend a lot of time doing professional development. So we're going out to schools, providing professional development to an entire faculty, helping them really create and build community at their school level. But then we also have teachers or administrators come to a district level training. We also, thinking about that assessment piece and how do we know that that professional development that we've been working on is actually happening in the classroom. So we started looking at what can we do to help schools and not make it a cookie cutter, one size fits all training, but how do we help schools where they are? So we worked with our CASEL consultants, and Pamela is Nashville's CASEL consultant, and also with our research and assessment department for 3 years, and we created a walkthrough tool. So my team is able to go into a school and not evaluate, but just assess and see where the school is, and looking at 3 main areas. So we look at the whole school climate. We also look at, in the classrooms, is SEL being integrated into instruction? And then we also look at that classroom management piece. And so we're able to sit down with the administrator and share with them, okay, here are some strengths that you have, here's some areas of growth, and then here's how our department can come in and help support you. We also, from a district perspective, collaborate with the curriculum and instruction department, making sure that SEL is truly integrated into everything academics. This isn't a standalone, it's not just today we talked about self-management and that's it, but how do we talk about self-management within a language arts class? Another big thing that from a district perspective that we are focusing on is we host an SEL conference. So we have our SEL conference coming up in the summer, so we're trying to gear up for that and get ready. We have people coming from out of state, but also from within the state to really look at best practices. So how can they make sure that SEL practices are happening in their school? So from a school level in Nashville, some of the things that we see are our administrators really doing what our superintendents were talking about a minute ago, like modeling these skills for their teachers, really envisioning and sharing what the goal is, sharing how SEL should be integrated into their everyday practices, but modeling those skills so that the teachers are seeing what they should be doing. We also have a big focus right now on welcoming our parents and our community into schools and sharing the work that's going on. So a lot of our schools are focusing on bringing the parents and the community into the school to share their vision and that common language. And then in the classroom, I mean, that's really where like the fun is, the magic happens, right? You'll see teachers greeting our students as they enter. You'll see common visions and clear expectations and rules so that there's no confusion as to how to be successful in the classroom. And then what Juan was talking about, voice is a huge thing for us. We want our students to be talking. So we're working on having more student voice in the classrooms and also collaboration. So more collaboration between the students, not so much just a teacher asks a question and a student responds, but turn and talk to a partner. How did you get to this answer? Challenge your partner. Did you come up with something different? Also more student reflection. So having students really reflect on those 5 core competencies that Pamela talked about earlier and integrating them into everything that's done. But the biggest thing I think for us within classrooms that we have really focused on is making sure that there's joy and excitement. Too many times we go into classrooms and the teacher's not happy. You can tell they're upset, they're overwhelmed, they're stressed out. So we want that joy and excitement to be for the teachers, but also for the students. And we want to make sure that we're seeing the teachers and the students really connected to each other and connected to school.
And I would just like to add to what Kyla is saying. There's one place that whenever I think about what does it really look like, there's a school in Chicago where you can actually go in and talk to a second grader or a kindergartner or a third grader, and he or she can tell you, you know, I used my self-management skills yesterday on the playground. I was really feeling angry, and I was able to go to the peace corner and work it out with that person I was angry with. Seeing it at that level, I mean, that's where it really is, like, that's why we're doing this. It's great to have this, you know, in central office and in schools and on the playground, but when you can actually see students using those skills and being able to talk about it, I mean, that's to me the reason why we do this work. And it actually happens with pre-kindergarten, you know, pre-K students and fifth graders and all the way up to high school. So
I'll just say this though, straight talk, right? Because I don't know how many of you are in urban environments where, I mean, this is large, we have large numbers of Black, brown, poor language learning. Most of the time, the largest populations of kids who've been over-identified for special ed, and many of them haven't had, I mean, let's just be honest, they're not getting it from home. Mom, dad, sometimes grandmom and granddad are so much older, right? They can hardly raise the kid. So like what I see, and this is like, so Austin had a whole, I mean, come on, Austin, everybody loves Austin. They want to move there. It's a lot of fun, a lot of educated people. Your Starbucks, barista is like a UT grad, right? I mean, and then you got other urban environments like Atlanta where the disparities are huge, and you have intergenerational poverty, 4 family generations deep, and the wealthiest of the wealthy. And what I think my lesson after being this, I look at things like, and I'm not kidding, but I think it is essential in urban environments. What does it look like? It looks like you have less police officers tasing kids in the hallway in a high school. It looks like bus drivers not pepper spraying children who get rowdy in a school bus. Like they have the skill set to talk them off the ledge. What it looks like is less suspensions and expulsions. What it looks like is when a turned up mom and her cousin and her sister who come as a pack to the front office, the secretary to the principal can talk to them in a way that de-escalates the anger. What it looks like, and I agree with this one, yeah, you can go to a peace corner, but what I see is on the playground, on the basketball court, and in our sports, things can get unbelievably intense. And I've seen kids kicked out of state championships and teams kicked out because of behavior of the coaches and the kids, where instead of, when you lose a game, you tear up the gym where you've got to change your clothes and everything. I mean, instead of you tearing that up because you're angry and ripping up the benches, you have a team talk about how to be a good loser so that you come back stronger and can win again. I mean, and it gives me goosebumps talking about it because I'm giving you real examples of what I experienced in my first year. Like kids opening up the security door in the back of a school bus, ripping out the seat and throwing it into the interstate, right? That doesn't happen anymore. It's not about, to me, it's not about like rules, it's about self-management. Setting a goal for yourself that's bigger than who you are, because you understand that how you behave as a peer and how you engage with an adult actually matters. And then the other thing is just, developing a healthy relationship. instead of cussing out your teacher, right? Developing a vocabulary that explains how you feel. I am frustrated that I have tried very hard to pass this test and you just give me an F without telling me why. I want to understand that. Those are the kinds of things that I think like we need to be trying hard to do, but also, and I would just say in really tough urban environments where kids just have not learned how to communicate, the vocabulary is so limited. If we don't have a shared vocabulary in our school system, I think adults and children to children can't find a meeting of engagement if you don't know how to talk to each other. And that has been a game changer for us. So it's not, I think, we have the monitoring tools and everything else, but there are big things, I think Chicago, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Dallas, these systems that are really struggling and have really, challenged data about how kids behave in school, have to document and understand. But to me, that's the culture shift that takes you from being a place where adults are afraid of the children and feel like they can't manage a second grader, to I have a role and I am not going to, I feel a responsibility and I am going to wrap my arms around them rather than push them out.
Great. I don't know about you, but I feel like we should do a standing ovation. Nobody stood.
It's all good. So they haven't left to go to the
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for staying. That's all I got to say.
Well, no. So I want to try.
Making a choice.
A responsible
Good
choice.
decision making.
So let me try to capture what Meria said in a digestible model, because I think the challenge that people sometimes have in getting their heads around what is SEL is when you hear a description like that, it sounds like everything, right? And what I will say is it is how we do school, right? That you cannot teach a child unless you are able to engage their head and their heart. And there are a lot of things that contribute to our ability to develop the social and emotional competencies, right? The self-management, all the stuff that we just talked about, relationship skills, and so forth. But it has to do with what happens in the classroom, what and how a student is taught and learns. It has to do with what happens in the school with respect to the policies and the practices of the adults that run the school. It has to do with the district level policies, and Meria and Juan and everybody named a few, but the district level policies around discipline, around standards, what is your hiring practice, all of those sorts of things. And it also has to do with how you relate to families and communities, because we are a school system that touches upon all of those things. And if you're interested in sort of seeing a systemic approach to SEL modeled, there are many resources that are available. The resources that Meria and Juan and others have developed over time through the Collaborating Districts Initiative are freely available on the CASEL.org website. So I'll just leave it to get into that detail later if you're interested. But let me ask one more question of the panel and then invite questions from the audience. What advice do you have for a district or for an educator or even for an innovator or an investor who wants to engage in SEL?
I would just like to talk about one of the priorities that we are now focused on at CASEL, and both the superintendents have alluded to the equity issues that they're seeing, that they encountered when they came into the district. And last September, CASEL intentionally launched an equity work group. And what we're doing as practitioners of SEL is that we're looking at the equity issues that were mentioned earlier. Discipline disparities, when you're seeing certain groups of students that are pushed out, that are going to alternative schools, or that are being suspended on a regular basis. Access, when you look at your advanced placement courses or your international baccalaureate courses, do you see the diversity across the board that is representative of your school, or do you see certain groups having access to those advanced courses? What is the representation of special ed students? All of these things around equity are also part of the SEL work that we're doing. And what we're finding in some districts is that they have an equity department and they have an SEL department. And after our cross-district meeting last year, where we had all of our CDI districts coming in together, we started talking about that, like, what's wrong with this picture? Why do we have a whole department of folks looking at equity, but we have an SEL department over here? And are the two talking? Are they collaborating? Is there a synergy? Are they working synergistically to align the priorities? And so what we've focused on at CASEL is to start looking at how are we changing board policies so that we're not pushing students out? How are we starting to collaborate on the SEL approaches, the instructional practices with the equity department, so that it's not two separate entities or siloed approaches to making the environment safe and supportive and welcoming to all students. That's really what we're talking about here, is having a classroom where every single student is welcomed and supported, and that it's not looked at as two separate strategies or approaches to the work. So that's been our focus, of really talking more with equity departments and SEL leads so that we are working more collaboratively in support of those students feeling safe and welcomed in their environments.
My advice is just that I think if you're an investor or a community leader, it's a workforce issue. What we're talking about is having people 20 years from now, when they're out of college and going into the workforce, more capable of being what I think almost every employer in the research says, adaptable. Like, you can embrace diversity. You're not afraid of anyone who's different to you. You are able to communicate in a way that allows you to be on a team and to get stuff done. That you are self-aware. I can't tell you how many people I work with. I'm like, do you know what you're saying here? That is so racist, or that is so inequitable, or that is so mean. But there's a moment right now in our country. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. Again, thank you for staying. That says, we're not about all people. But I'm a public school superintendent. All kids means all kids. And so that means when you go into the workforce in this ever flat global economy, you're going to be working with people, this generation of kids, with people all over the world, and you may never leave your room to have to work with them. And so I think, my advice is, folks need to get real about what this means for a future workforce, what it means for our country in the future, when we have all these different people with different backgrounds, and we need to all be able to not freak out about difference and really embrace that in a way that makes us stronger as a country and as a player in this global field. And then I would say, if the other part of the advice is just like, you need to, I think, want to be part of just cleaning up what we've experienced in public education over the last couple of decades. We must have the same kind of movement that people have done around high stakes accountability, or pick any other reform approach to education that hasn't made our kids stronger in minds, but also in hearts. And so I think my advice to our country and all these people who are here who are brilliant innovators is like, if you want to keep innovating, you've got to find a way to connect with the gateway of who's being educated, and that is public education. And if you're not making our kids stronger, then as the cornerstone of our democracy, you're making the country weaker.
I hate to follow up. That's great. So from my perspective, working a little bit closer with schools or in schools, just realizing that this is a growth mindset for a lot of people. This is not a comfort zone. And so, have that knowledge behind it and know that this is a process. This is something that they're going to constantly be working on. But also thinking that, starting with the adults and don't go full scale. That is a mistake that we made in Nashville. We tried to go full scale in 159 schools with one person doing the work. You can't do that, realistically speaking, and so you end up doing more harm. So now we're trying to go back and figure out a new plan, a new process, and a rollout plan. So start a little bit smaller, and then you build it up, and you get more growth. And then also use the resources that are out there. Karen talked about the CASEL site, and there's over 500 resources on there. I think all of the districts have contributed to that. So there's so much out there that if you're new to this, you don't need to create something. There's something out there for everybody.
Yeah, my only advice is just, this is the way it's going to be. This is the way we're going to do school going forward. I think, if there's any silver lining or the good that came of all this high stakes accountability is that we are going to begin to focus on doing school this way and taking care of kids differently and approaching school and relationships differently. So that is a big positive. I don't see us in our lifetime going back to, increasing the number of tests and decreasing the focus on SEL. This is the future. This is the way, we need to start teaching this in college to our teachers that are going to schools of education and make sure that our administrators are getting this. So for us, I think this is not a fad that's going to go away and we're just sort of out in these islands. We are setting the standard for the way schools need to operate going forward, and I'm really excited about being a part of that.
So what questions do any of you in the audience have? Yeah.
I work on student privacy, and one of the things that constantly come up in my work is this terror around social emotional data being collected at all, and then it going past a child's teacher, and then it going past, state, federal government, UN, depending on how many conspiracy theorists you really want to follow. But there's a real concern I consistently hear from parents and terror around this very sensitive data being collected without some sort of privacy frameworks around it. I'm very curious about what you've done in your districts to sort of deal with that and to educate parents about how this works, what privacy is around it, and make them realize the benefits instead of the fears.
We're talking about this a lot. We're trying to, our board has done something that very few boards had, begin to try to use social emotional measures. But the reality is, there's really not that much there yet. We're still looking at what are the impact on the traditional, the dropout rates, attendance, lower discipline rates, hopefully, improved scores and accountability. But we're not collecting a lot of SEL data necessarily. The first shift is to get the adults to think about it more and move in that direction. I'm not worried about them. They can call me, they can sue me. I'm going to push as hard as we can push to do whatever we can for kids. And I'm not worried about the black helicopter people. It doesn't matter to me. We're going to figure it out. We're going to do it the right way. And we'll push as far as we can. But we're just not there yet. Unless Maria's seen it differently or you are, we're just not. We're trying to figure that out. I've met with software developers and a number of companies trying to see how we can capture some of the SEL data. Right? Certainly it's manifested through attendance and discipline, and those things are, but that data is already there, so nobody can complain about that. I don't know, that's just from my perspective where we're at.
Yeah, we are very thoughtful about FERPA and and not unnecessarily or accidentally exposing a fragile child life, to the public or those. So everything we have there, data agreements, you're right. I think we're just tracking some of the more traditional outcome data pieces, but I know that we are through CASEL using people like really smart people like AIR, the American Institutes for Research, and folks like that who know how to do this better than any individual school district. So I would say probably all the districts, I don't know about everybody else, but the ones that are involved in this collaborative and the, what are the other districts called?
Wallace districts.
Yeah, the Wallace districts. We have all the ones participating in this work. We are looking to, our national kind of organizers of all of us to be sure that we're doing all of this the right way. But there's some other things that I think we've been, that I do think are careful, like when kids do get in a sharing circle and they share a lot, and then what happens with that. Those things I've come across a couple of instances like that, and it does leave a lot to interpretation about what's appropriate. Is a teacher prepared to talk about those issues? Who is documenting that information? And so we've had some moments where we've had to kind of press pause and say, okay, maybe we do need to take a step back and try to understand a little bit more about some of the case-by-case experiences kids have had that have been shared, and who collects them, how is that information collected, how is the kid protected. And so we're learning, but so far I think the folks who understand this better than all of us, and even so much so that I know y'all have talked to even the U.S. Department of Ed about how we can go about this in a smart way, is really coming out of the research that CASEL is doing.
Yeah, let me just summarize a few things quickly to move on to more questions, and we're running short on time. The very sexy name called the Assessment Work Group is a project that is a national project that CASEL is undertaking right now. You can find information on it on the website. Bottom line, you have to be really careful. It is very important to be able to measure the impact of what we're doing, but the how you measure it is something that we are deeply, deeply analyzing in partnership with over 180 collaborators who we will be issuing a statement. Our position right now is that assessment data ought to be used for climate culture. It should be a roll-up. It should be used to inform how to personalize learning for students to some extent. But there's a lot, as all big waves of new cool things come on, lots of innovation, piles on, and I would caution too much about deep student level assessment, at least right now. Yeah.
She had.
Sorry. Go
She
ahead.
had her hand up first when I saw her.
I can't even see you.
Hi guys, thank you. I was just wondering how this initiative has impacted or will impact your communication to potential teachers and staff members, how you vet those people and how you onboard them. Is there something different you're looking for or doing in their onboarding now that SEL is something you're really focused on?
Well, I mean, my experience now as a 3-time superintendent is that, we have a teacher shortage. I mean, like there's a lot that we're trying to manage around hiring in general in public education, depending on where you are. In Austin, it was a lot easier. We had a lot of wait lists for things. In Atlanta, we've been blessed. People want to come to the city, but I have seen certainly how other districts have been pressed around this issue. So so we don't make it a requirement, but what we have done, so it's a couple of things. So I'm probably going to now a couple people aren't going to like me very much when I say some of these things. But what we have said is that when we interview with people, there are things that we're putting out there. For example, we have a new operating model that's about autonomy and flexibility and discretion at the school site level. If you're going to be a leader in Atlanta Public Schools, if you're not down with that work, meaning you have to work with a governing team at your school level to make this, then don't take this job. The second thing we say is social emotional learning is a priority. It is actually, the superintendent teaches every opening onboarding session with every new employee 5 times a year. And that is one of the things. So as soon as, we tell you that when we hire you, I remind you when we do orientation. And then we made one more step where now our principals they have the discretion in the first 3 months of a job with a teacher, if we've hired that person and they are not the right fit, we can terminate their employment immediately. We don't have to go through the whole process of, what we typically have to do to remove someone from our district. And that for us, for APS, is a real game changer, because we've been stuck in a big, what do you call that process? And
Due process?
yeah,
Due process.
But beyond due process, like where it's, we've overlaid even more conditions on ourselves over the years, and it has not worked. You have to have a stack of paper like this, and when we can, even if you have video of someone like abusing a child or being inappropriate, I mean, it just was so much work. So we're trying to streamline that a lot, depending on which side of the fence you are on due process and things. Different people have different opinions. But we've become very aggressive about trying to find the right people with the right mindset, because I think anyone can learn, how to do better math, how to teach reading better. I mean, we can do that. But if you're not interested in the value statements we're making about kids and schools, I think that's harder to overcome than somebody knowing how to do Orton Gilliam training. I can go get them training on that. If you don't really believe that kids have a voice, if you don't want them engaging with you, then you have a problem in your instructional theory.
So, we have been asked to end this session because another one is coming in 8 minutes, but I will just volunteer myself to stand outside the doors, as I have been asked, to answer any additional questions that we didn't get to. I can't speak for our panelists, but you're welcome to join if you can. And I just want to thank Pamela and Meria and Kyla and Juan for your commitment to your expertise and for sharing it with our audience.